It's a creek,
Yeah.
so it's not the property involved.
Well, this is at the side, actually. At the side of the building, I think, is in here. It's kind of on the.
So this is not the building.
Are we ready to go,
involved.
guys? We're all ready to go, right? Ready to go. Okay. Good evening. This is a meeting of the Athens Board of Zoning Appeals. The meeting is called to order at this time at 7 p.m. The date is June 13. The board consists of 5 members and an alternate. The alternate, when present, takes part in discussions of the board and becomes a voting member in the absence or conflict of interest of a regular member. This evening, present are members Betty Hollow, John Golsey, Roger Gruser, Greg Lavelle, and myself, Muriel Frederick, the chair. Also present this evening is Zoning Administrator Steve Pearson, Paul Eschenbacher, our acting secretary. The board operates according to the following procedure. The chair will name and state the case, describe the case. The zoning administrator will cite the specifics of the refusal. The appellant or a representative then will state the case for granting the appeal. Testimony next will be taken from those who support the granting of the appeal, then those who wish to speak in general comment, and then those who support denial of the appeal. Following all testimonies, the board will receive concluding remarks from the appellant. Discussion from the floor will then be closed. The board will deliberate and render a decision. I haven't been here since these came in. Are we all, am I picking up? Good, okay. Under Athens City Code, Section 230703B, the board has the power to grant such variances from the code as will not be contrary to the public interest, so that the spirit of the code shall be observed, public safety and welfare secured, and substantial justice done. Athens City Code, Section 230910C, requires that variances from the code shall not be granted unless the board makes specific findings of fact based directly on the evidence provided to it, that each and every one of the following 6 criteria are met. First, practical difficulty or undue hardship. There must exist a practical difficulty or an undue hardship caused by exceptional circumstances pertaining to the specific piece of property. The second is exceptional circumstances. There must exist exceptional circumstances or conditions applying to the property or its intended use that do not in general apply to properties in the same zoning district. Number 3, the preservation of equal property rights. It must be determined that literal interpretation of the code would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same vicinity, while granting the variance would not convey special privilege. And number 4, minimum variance. It must be determined that the variance is the minimum required to make reasonable use of the property. Number 5, absence of detriment. It must be determined that the granting of the variance will not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent properties, nor materially impair the purposes of the code or the public interest. And the last one, not of a general nature. The variance sought must not be of a general or recurring nature, such that the situation would more reasonably be handled by changing the law. The board also is empowered to hear decisions, to hear and decide applications for conditional use, substituting for non-conforming uses, and so on. However, none of that is going to be done today. Any person aggrieved by the decision of the board may file an appeal to the Court of Common Pleas. Such petition must be filed within 30 days after the mailing of the board's resolution to the appellant. Tonight there are 3 cases on the agenda. Case number 0608V for 1008 East State Street in Zone B3, Southeastern Ohio Management Company, LLC is the appellant. For case number 0609V for 22 and 22.5 Franklin Avenue in Zone R3, Richard Hines is the appellant. And for case number 0612V for 65 Home Street in Zone R1, Linda Keffer is the appellant. The board is required by law to take testimony under oath. Anyone wishing to speak, please stand to be sworn. If you think you're likely to make any comment at all, you need to be sworn. All right. Do you swear the testimony you give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Okay. Well, for our first case for 1008 East State Street. Steve, would you please give us the background for this?
My name's Steve Pearson. I'm the zoning administrator for the city of Athens, Ohio. The first case on the agenda for this evening has to do with 1080 State Street, or it's commonly known as University Mall. The mall was recently purchased by Southeastern Ohio Management Company, and they're in the process now of doing some investigation for upgrades of the property, including signage. One of the problems that this particular facility has is it's very dependent on its freestanding sign, because wall signs are limited to the portion of a wall where a tenant space is located. So every tenant on the back side of the mall who might go in would have a wall sign that just faced the hillside, couldn't be seen from the street. So wall signs would only be something that tenants on the front side of the building could have, as opposed to the strip malls that we have on the other side of the street where every tenant space faces the street. This is just a little bit different here at the University Mall. I received an application from Performance Sign to install a sign, and I refused it. However, what you do have is a picture at the third page in of the packet of information that you have of a sign that I did approve. One of the first things I discovered in reviewing the application was the applicant had not included the arched portion with the 3 columns or the logo on top of the existing sign, so I had to calculate that area. The board recently granted me permission to use any geometric form. It used to be limited to triangles, rectangles, and squares, and then we had the case of how big is Wendy's head and the Burger King round logo. So a while back, the board gave me permission to use any geometric form and measurement. So I included the arched part in the top. This particular sign right here totaled up to 94 square feet. So I did issue a permit for this. On the next page, you can see the sign that was refused. There's an indication of an extra panel, which brings the total up to 114 square feet. So from 94 to 114, additional 20 square feet. So same sign, same post, everything's the same, except what they're requesting is an extra panel to be included below the panel that's permitted. The area that includes the mall is approximately 17 acres. The entire site is over 40 acres in area. There's almost 900 feet of road frontage at the mall. However, the code doesn't differentiate between a lot that's very small and has very limited road frontage or a lot that's very large and has hundreds of feet of road frontage. There's no differentiation. Everybody has the same right for one freestanding sign at a maximum of 100 square feet. And I guess that's about it, unless you have any questions.
Well, I thought maybe the signs were with the businesses, go with the business. If there's 5 businesses, maybe they're entitled to have 5 signs of less than 100. Is that true?
No, the code before it was changed recently, and that was, the sign ordinance was changed before the zoning code in 2003. The sign ordinance was changed, I think, in 2002. It actually said that a freestanding sign where there were multiple businesses in a facility was limited to 5 advertising areas only. So it didn't matter if you had 15 or 20 or 50 tenants, you could only have 5 advertising spaces. In 2002, when the ordinance was revised, what it did was it did not limit the portions. In other words, you could have 20, but it did still maintain that 100 square feet maximum. So, yeah, it does make it harder when you bust it up into 20 different pieces for 20 different tenants, but on the other hand, how could the owner pick 5 tenants and say you're the only 5 that can be on the board? So this is really just kind of functioning as an index board of the businesses inside. I mean, to me, it's really not much in the way of advertising. It's more like information. But this business is here. I mean, how much advertising can you do with each business having just one of these small portions? Now, there is the ability for interchangeable type on this. You know, the farmer's market is out there, and there's different events at the mall that could be advertised with changeable type.
Is the entire board is changeable type? Or just the newly requested bottom portion?
I'm not really sure.
The entire board's changeable type.
Okay.
Other than the University Mall.
Okay.
The code doesn't say anything about if it's a permanent or a temporary type of thing. It says changeable type is permitted. So you could put something up and it could say, whatever, Tractor Supply, if they move in the Penny's area. Or they may not have any advertising at all, and they may just advertise events.
Okay.
So 14 square feet over the, so what would that be? A 14% increase over what's permitted. 100 square feet is permitted, this is 114.
The whole point of that sign ordinance was to reduce availability of advertising space on road front when they were doing, I mean, at the time that they were doing it, they were really trying to reduce advertising signs. Is that the idea? Is that why they set it up that way?
I have no idea. The sign ordinance was revised in 1989, and I've never seen any commentaries or
That'd be my
rationale.
impression. They're trying to minimize the gaudiness of the
It
The community.
seems like it, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because, for example, too, if you didn't limit the number of freestanding signs, every business in a 20-facility structure, you could have 20 freestanding signs. I think a lot of it was just, to limit it to one, not two or three, and to limit the size, and then each property owner could divvy that space up however they saw fit.
Okay.
So I think it's, for compared to a lot of communities, it's a very high standard. One sign in the limited area with no relationship between the size of the lot, the number of tenants, or the length of public road frontage. Some jurisdictions have a little more sophisticated way of determining face area. It has to do with the speed limit on the street, the distance the sign is from the street. So in other words, it's more a psychological/visual kind of thing. How big does the sign appear to be, not how big is it really. If this sign were back by the mall, it would appear to be very small. Now, one thing that is very liberal in Athens is that freestanding sign is allowed to be right up at the street, right at the property line. So you're getting maximum exposure if that's what you want for your 100 square feet.
Okay. All right, well, then just have to figure out whether they get to
If
make it more
Mr.
than
Sligo were here, he would probably tell us because he was on that committee.
Yeah, well, I'll have to ask him next time he comes to town. Okay.
Oh, he's here.
Oh, he is?
So, yes, he is.
But he's not?
But he's not in attendance tonight.
Oh, I'm surprised. Okay. Well, thank you, Steve. All right, then, are you making the presentation tonight? Would you please come up and state your name for the cameras?
Good evening. I'm John Valentour, RVC Architects, and I'm here in behalf of Southeastern Ohio Management Company in relation to the sign at the University Mall. And I think Mr. Pearson pretty much described a lot of the issues I think that warrant consideration for a variance here on this project. And I did, February 24th, write a review trying to go through the different the articles in the code that need to be met. I think you all have a copy of that, if I'm not mistaken, as to why this variance should be granted on this project. And I probably should just go through there and read these and see what you think of the findings. And practical difficulty, the property is large in area, approximately 17 acres, with a single building of approximately 283,000 square feet located on one property. The allowable signage is not proportional to the size of the facility, and the specific site has extraordinary conditions which create practical difficulty when literal enforcement of the regulations is imposed. In terms of exceptional circumstances, the property is a retail center designed to contain many businesses under one roof. Individual exposure for each business is not possible with signage mounted on the exterior of the structure. As indicated by Mr. Pearson here, a lot of the businesses do not have exterior exposure because they're interior on the mall. The identity of the business must be related to the identity of the entire facility. It is important to give the entire complex adequate public exposure in this case. And currently, no other use in this zone has the same conditions. The old Athens Mall, which has recently been converted into a strip mall. So the fact that this is a mall in itself makes it a exceptional circumstance, as it's the only one we have now in Athens. Preservation of equal property rights. The right to advertise your business is provided to every establishment in this zone. However, when the business does not have direct exposure to a public way, consideration must be given to allow exposure of their services. This would not grant special privileges denied to other properties. Minimum variance. This request is only for the additional 14 square feet in area on that existing sign out at the mall. It is not a significant amount when you consider the street frontage this sign is located on is over 850 linear feet on East State Street. Absence of detriment. This property will not cause a substantial detriment to adjacent property owners. The sign is located near the middle of the property and will not block or interfere with any other property owner. The zoning code or public interest will not be affected by granting this variance. The scale of the requested signage will not create a condition out of place to the existing environment. Essentially, the parameters of the sign will not be increased at all. Actually, the addition is going to be within the context of the existing signage out there. And not of a general nature. This request is not of a general nature for many of the reasons stated above. The University Mall is the only indoor mall in Athens. Even as large-scale developments have occurred in this zoning district, this site remains as a substantial facility. Special consideration needs to be given when the opportunity to advertise your business is limited due to the multiple tenants under a single roof, as we have here. The structure also has a large setback from East State Street, making it even more important to obtain adequate exposure. You know, plans are being made out at the mall to develop and to try to enhance that large expanse of space with more permanent structures, and basically really the farmer's market and any other outlot development that occurs. And that's going to make it even more important for people to realize what's actually taking place in the mall itself whenever you interrupt that parking lot as it is right now.
I have a question. One of my interests always with one of these signs is that it be something that can be read from the road. Is that area down there at the bottom, is that still going to be visible to somebody going by in a car?
Mhm. Yes, it
Or
will.
will they actually have to be right up? Okay.
No, it should be visible from East State Street.
Okay.
Still.
That was my only question. And when you decided, or when it was decided that this particular section down here was required, was it decided because of specific businesses or from account of the number of spaces in the mall that were going to need advertising, or what was the, how was this particular sign?
It was, I think the reason was, we just needed, because of the number of tenants that will be located in the facility, that the existing space was not large enough to properly give them advertising at the street.
And does this, if this were granted, would that be adequate for the number of business spaces there are in that mall? I mean, it's, as you've pointed out, a
I
very
believe
large
that the
mall.
variance that they're requesting is for this space, and that's what they consider to be
That will
what
be
they need.
sufficient. They're not going to say, oh, oops.
We need it bigger. No.
So they're addressing what they consider to be the potential for the facility with regards to the number of business places.
Yes.
Okay. They've got however number of spaces we got here, number of spaces in that mall, potentially. Okay. Well, when you say that they're considering fixing up that large property, are they considering doing any landscaping, like trees?
Yes.
They are? This is excellent news.
Pardon me?
This is excellent news. If they are really considering trees, that's good. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in support of the variance, or in general comment, or in opposition? Steve?
Just a general comment related to your question about visibility for this extra panel. Right now, the farmer's market has a temporary banner located right where this panel will be. And, I mean, it's highly visible going up and down the street. There's no ground cover, there's no shrubbery or anything like that around the base.
Well, it looked like there's space for 6 businesses to advertise there, and Athens Farmers Market is just the one thing. That's why I was wondering.
Right. So,
Okay.
but it's that sign that's down there now, that temporary sign is basically where that panel is going to go, and it's highly visible
Okay,
from the street.
thank you. Any other comments? And if not, then comments from the floor are closed, and we're ready to deliberate. Do we want to have a discussion that we need to have here?
Isn't it the signs that University Mall is like a directional sign that shouldn't be counted toward the 100 square foot? Because, if you want to know where the mall is, it doesn't specifically addresses any businesses, it just says University Mall.
It's the address, yeah.
So that probably should be something that we could consider as is a mostly of a directional sign, maybe.
Well, yeah, I think
And
That's
the
really
exterior of it isn't going to
identification,
change. I mean, the
Identification,
silhouette's going to be the same.
right, and as long as that's
University
gonna.
Mall itself is not really the business, it identifies the whole,
It's the address.
cluster of the.
University
yeah,
Mall being the address.
Yeah.
Okay. And the rest of it being
being
business advertising.
Yeah.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. Any other commentary?
Well, my first thought was, if you get if he signs more than 8 businesses, then come back and let us know you need more signage, rather than have this be empty
Oh, I'm willing to wager that it's not going to be empty.
until they get 6 more. And then if you let them increase the sign, we just finally got McDonald's to decrease theirs to come within compliance with
But
the
their
code.
sign was just way up to the sky, I have to admit.
Well, we made them come within compliance of the code,
Took a long time.
so.
Yeah. Once it's done, in other words, it's difficult to undo.
We don't base our decisions on past decisions, do we?
No.
Not as a rule.
Time again.
Each one's exceptional.
Well, maybe
Okay.
this is an incentive to get some businesses if they say they can provide enough signs,
No,
maybe.
no comparison between McDonald's frontage versus.
Yeah, that's a good point. Compare the frontage of
Yeah.
McDonald's and the frontage of this
Not even
enormous
the same.
mall. And having the same size sign, it does seem to put them at a bit of a disadvantage. So, the individual business owners in there, so. Which I assume are going to be individual business owners who are just renting, as currently is the case, I think. Anyway, anything else? Would anybody care to make a motion?
I move to grant a variance to the property at 1008 East Estate Street from Section 230313 I-4D to permit a freestanding sign with a face area of 114 square feet, where 100 square feet is the permitted maximum.
I'll second that.
Okay. All right. Then, for the findings, have we agreed on what the practical difficulty or undue hardship is?
The sign is too small to really identify all the businesses that are within this building.
Yeah.
You need more space to identify each one. properly.
Each business does not have a building
Well,
frontage.
when it was full, each business didn't have one either.
No.
And I don't think we ever heard any complaints.
Well, and it's not full now, is it? Maybe there's something there.
Well, and then we had some large stores too. I don't
We
think someone
had
like.
large stores, and
Yeah.
we're not going to have probably another Kmart kind of
they're
an
gonna have
operation there.
Breaks and
And Kmart had their advertising on their
building.
part of the
big time,
building because they had frontage. They had building frontage. But a lot of the businesses in there don't. It probably is hard to do business when you're invisible. And it could have something to do with why it's so empty. Anyway, the property is larger than any place else in town and does have the capacity to have businesses without available external advertising. That, I think, is practically a difficulty. So,
It'd also be an exceptional circumstance.
that would be the next one. Is that make it exceptional circumstance? Yes. The fact of of how it was designed.
Some of the stores won't have,
The front view, yeah.
Yeah, most malls that I've seen that have businesses in them have some way of advertising on the outside that there is a business there. They don't require,
like the one
they
that
don't-
they just
yeah.
remodeled beside of Kroger's. Every one of them you
Mhm.
can identify
Right.
them big time.
yeah, they don't require the businesses to do their business without identifying themselves externally. But there is the point that businesses aren't there yet. On the other hand, attracting businesses that you can't advertise might be on the difficult side.
Who else?
I don't know whether everybody's coming to compliance or not.
Okay, then on our third point, how about preservation of equal property rights? We come back to the same problem, don't we?
Yep, sure do. Doesn't have direct exposure
So-
to the public street. Got to be given consideration.
Somebody have another point of view on that?
I think there might be some businesses that they may have actually over 100 square foot sign in that neighborhood, so not as big as the mall, but the smaller one. So we're not giving these people extra additional privileges.
Each of the individuals who would be advertising on the sign certainly would be having less than what they would have if they had a standalone property to advertise on. So it seems like it would be preserving an equal right. All right, minimum. Would the variance be the minimum required to make reasonable use? Well, it's not the entire property we're dealing with, but would this be the minimum variance required to make a reasonable sign size?
14%, that's certainly not a remarkable increase.
Okay. Then how about detriment? Will granting the variance create a detriment to adjacent properties?
Aren't any adjacent properties really.
I guess there aren't. How about impairing the purposes of the code or the public interest?
We're still minimizing sign exposures.
If I were sure, I think really the purpose of the code was simply to keep signage within a reasonable proportion to the buildings that it's advertising the businesses in. And this doesn't seem to me to have gotten unreasonable either. And for public interest, if the public wants to find a business, I would think that they would be interested in being able to find a sign. Does anybody feel differently?
No.
Okay. General nature, is the variance something that's of so general or recurring a nature that they need to go to city council to get the law changed?
It's not likely we'll have any more indoor malls in the area.
Doesn't seem like it wasn't too likely, no. Okay, well, in that case, then.
And
are
another
we-
thing I like about it is that the silhouette isn't changing, you know, it isn't
Yes.
as though they're wanting to make it higher or wider.
Right,
or-
they're staying within the original
Yeah,
approved sign.
that's pretty remarkable in
Yeah.
itself.
I think so, too. Well, is there any further discussion? Would we like to begin with Betty to take our
I'm
vote?
going to vote yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes,
And I'm going to vote yes also. So the variance is granted. Okay. All right. Our next case is for 22 and 22 and a half Franklin Avenue. It's an R3 property, and looking for a conversion of a dwelling to make it into a duplex, it sounds like. And Steve, could you give us the background on it?
22 and a half Franklin has been a duplex for a very long period of time. I think the records having at least one unit listed as a rental at the Code Enforcement Office go clear back almost to the beginning days of permit issuance from the city. However, there was never a requirement, I mean, there was just an acknowledgement that it was a duplex, you know, but half of it was owner-occupied, so no permit necessary, no inspection necessary. But in 1997, when the parking requirements were changed, it said that if you change the use of a structure, then your parking has to comply for all uses in the structure. So 97 essentially made conversion of any single building or portion thereof, when that was requested to be changed, then all the parking was required.
But explain how it is that a use that has been ongoing for umpty gajillion years now is considered to be a change if they want to rent both parts instead of just one part.
The definition that was included in 97 about what a converted dwelling unit was, and parking was required for all uses when there was a conversion of a unit, that definition included conversion from owner-occupied to rental. So in other words, the actual definition
Okay,
was, so...
just for the
yeah, it's-
record.
I see what you're saying. It's been a duplex forever. It's always been a duplex. This is not a request to take a single building and duplex it.
Right.
There's been two dwelling units there for a long time. The property's been in Mr. Hines' family for quite a while, but it's just there's always been a family member living in one of the units.
Right. So it's actually written in the code, and that it's expected that if it's an owner-occupied dwelling with a second apartment, that's rented, and then it changes to not being an owner-occupied, that is an actual change. It's not just a...
Right, it's a change by definition.
Okay.
That's what, there are quite a few properties in town that, well, there are several, let's say, that have that same situation, where there might be, say, a garage apartment or additional unit within the principal dwelling structure.
And
There's
do
a
we-
house
and-
for sale down on Morris Avenue right now. It's got a duplex garage and an owner-occupied front building. If that property sells and somebody wants to rent the front half that had been, the front house had been owner-occupied, for example, if the owner lives on the site and there's no request for increased occupancy or increased number of units, the parking requirement doesn't apply. But in this case, it's going from half owner-occupied or family-occupied, family of the owner, and rental to just being completely rental. By definition, that change requires parking.
And do you know the intent of the code here?
Those, I hear Mr. Safranek and others come here and speaking about the wisdom of council and their intent and purpose. I'm not sure what it was. I think, I can remember a statement from Mr. Baum at the time in 97, and people said, this is something where, isn't it a little bit too late? All the horses are out of the barn. And his response was, well, not all of them. And so those are the type of cases that we're hearing since 1997 with this parking requirement. So what we're doing is, there are, even though 72% of the town's for rent, that number keeps increasing. In 1991, when the strategic plan of the Planning Commission was adopted, that number was 62%. And one of the kind of signal flares that went up was the towns converting to rental, or mobilizing is the term that they used, too quickly. So since 91, the trend has gone from 62% to 72%. So in a way, Mr. Baum was right. You had essentially, you still had 38% of the town that could be converted to rental, in theory. So there were still a lot of issues dealing with insufficient parking. And I think that was part of the basis of it. Now, why there wasn't a grandfathering for those uses previously permitted but not being changed, and just requiring parking for the part being changed, I'm not sure, but the code was specifically written to say when any use changes in a building and there's insufficient parking for that and all uses in the building, parking for all uses must be provided.
Okay.
Now, in this situation, parking is being provided at the correct rate. There's a minimum of 2 parking spaces per unit, or 1 for each permitted occupant. And 4 parking spots are being provided, or suggested to be provided. There's only 1 parking spot there now. This is an R3 zone, multifamily zone. And so the duplex use is a permitted use. 4 parking spots are what would be required. In a duplex in an R1 or R2 zone, stack parking's allowed. For some reason, when the code was written, R1 and R2 zones allowed stack parking. R3 zones did not allow stack parking. So the only problem here is the zone. It's not, it's the correct amount of parking. It's a permitted use. It's in the right zone. It's just that the parking requirements don't allow 2 cars to trap 2 other cars in, which is what Mr. Hines proposes.
Okay.
It's not for not enough parking, it's just for the stack parking. Now, when we started looking into the situation, I got with Scott Lambert over at the city Water and Sewer Department, and I asked him about stormwater control, because when you park 4 cars or more, the code says it has to be paved. In speaking with Mr. Lambert, he was concerned about additional runoff in this area because we have insufficient storm sewers there. We have brick streets, we have old things that do exist are very old. There's a problem with an excessive amount of water in a big rainstorm right at the corner of Carpenter and State right now. So the sewer department's recommendation is that the area be allowed to remain, or to be gravel rather than paved.
So this would require a variance also then?
Well, that's a recommendation. The code says that the board can call on other city agencies or divisions or departments. I just kind of did that in advance for you. So that wasn't anything that was originally viewed as a problem. It's essentially a recommendation from another city department that you grant an additional variance to allow it to remain gravel instead of having it paved. There's no storm sewer in the area to tie it into.
But that's
And
not
just-
what they're asking, though. You're not asking it about.
I put a note on the agenda that
Yeah, but
the,
it doesn't say in the
at the
statement.
time of
They're
the
not
app,
asking for it,
yeah,
but
at the time of the
it should be
application, at the
directed.
time of the original refusal, there was not a question about was it going to be paved or not. That's when I started looking into it, and the sewer department said, boy, our preference would be that this not be paved. So this is not necessarily a request of Mr. Hines, it's a recommendation of the sewer department. And that's why it wasn't on the original refusal.
Okay, does anybody have questions for Steve? Okay, well, thank you. That gives us the background. Who is going to make the presentation from you? How would you please come and state your name and address for the record?
My name's Richard Hines. I own the property there. It has been in my family for 45 years now. And until this spring, I've always had a relative that lived in this lower apartment. And in March, my son was the last one in there. He moved out. And that's why I'm trying to obtain this variance to bring the property up to code in order to rent, this apartment. And I think I've run out of family members, so.
I see. Well, has anybody any questions? for
Yeah, I had a
Mr. Hines?
question. Mr. Hines, when I was standing on Franklin Avenue looking at your house,
It's across
on
the
the right
street.
side, not the alley side, the other side, right next to your house, there is like a driveway. Is that yours?
No, that's the house next door. That's
But
mine.
isn't that in
You
your
can-
property?
Pardon me?
Isn't that in your property? That
Not if
driveway?
you were standing at Franklin Avenue and looking at my house.
Yeah, right here, yeah, right in here.
Yeah, that belongs to the house next door then.
There was a driveway just next to your house, right there. Like maybe 2 cars can stack in there. That's not
Mhm.
yours, huh?
No, that belongs to the house next door.
Okay, so this is not the
My,
property line then?
No, there's a corner pin in here at this property line, I think. Right in here.
Okay, so that driveway is in
This
partially
is
in
not a
your-
driveway. This is the edge of the property, and this is the edge of the house.
Right.
So the
There's
driveway
only
is,
about
the
5 feet in
driveway is
there.
actually
Right
over
over here.
there. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I thought it
There's only
was
about
okay.
5 feet there, I think, and then 5.
Yeah. It looked like it was paved right to your house.
No, there's a pin,
Mm.
there's an iron pin right there beside that sidewalk that is
Okay.
the property line.
How many bedrooms are in the house?
Pardon me?
How many bedrooms does the house have?
3.
There are 3
2
bedrooms.
upstairs,
And
one
one
downstairs.
downstairs,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. Interesting. I'm not sure why a house with only 3 bedrooms requires 4 parking places, but it must,
says a minimum of 2 per unit.
it doesn't matter what size of unit it is. Okay, that's why. Thank you, okay. It looked like it must be a very small house. Okay.
I put a picture in there, which is right across the alley from where
Yes, we saw that.
my property is, and that's basically what I'd like to do to mine. To do there is put the stacked parking with the gravel.
Yes, you have, there's a carport currently
Yes,
on
ma'am.
your house.
And I have to
And that
take
little,
that down.
that would have to come down, but
Yes,
the
ma'am.
little porch that, the,
The stoop,
the stoop is going to stay though,
Yes, ma'am.
right?
that gives me enough room from that stoop to the property line to put the 4 cars in there. And it leaves, yeah, it leaves 4 feet to put, on that thing there, we were gonna put trees and stuff in that
Yes.
last 4 feet.
Best put some kind of, something up there to keep them from getting run down.
Well, there's 18 feet there. A car doesn't take up 9 feet
No.
wide. The code says it has to be 9 feet wide, but a car, normally, nowadays anyway, especially, they don't take up 9 feet wide. So there should be plenty of room in there. I don't think anything will get run over.
All right, does anybody have any other questions? Questions? Well, something may occur to us later, but I guess no one has any questions right now. Thank you. Is there anyone present who'd like to speak in support of this application, or in general comment, or against the application? Then, if that's the case, then the comment from the floor is closed, and we're ready to talk about this.
Well, I guess I do have a question now that I'm thinking very
that's
feebly
awful.
from Mr. Pearson. If there are 3 bedrooms, then potentially there might be 3 renters, 2 up and 1 down. Is that correct?
The number of occupants in a rental unit is driven by square footage, not number of bedrooms.
Right.
So for example, you can have a room 7 feet wide, 10 feet long, 70 square feet, and that room, if that's the single bedroom, allows 1 occupant in the structure. You can take that same bedroom, increase the floor area to 120 square feet or an additional 50 square feet, which would take it to 120, then you can have 2 tenants in one bedroom.
So what's the potential for this house up and down? What's the maximum number that the square footage would allow?
Well, I don't know, I've never been in the downstairs, and if you look on that packet of information you've got, it should say on there the maximum number of tenants requested. So
Well-
just because a place, say, is big enough, you got a 2-bedroom place that's big enough for 4, that doesn't mean you have to have 4, you can just have 2. So I'm not sure what Mr. Hines requested.
Requested maximum, so he's requesting 3, 2 up and 1 down?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
So even though those bedrooms may be larger upstairs, that parking requirement's not driven, it's driven by the number of tenants, not the number of bedrooms.
So if we
Well,
give him the
actually,
variance,
it's driven by the number of units.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the most basic thing, and that's why, yeah, for a 1-bedroom, you have to
So
have
you
2
still have
parking
to have
spots.
2
For example, the way the code's written, when River's Edge, a 3-building planned unit development over by River's Edge Apartment Complex, formerly known as Lakeview, had 81 bedroom and 40 efficiency apartments for a total of 120 possible tenants. They were required to have 240 parking spaces, 2 per tenant.
Right.
So that's 180 square feet of impervious surface, a total of 360 square feet of impervious surface required to have a rental, but somebody can live in 70 square feet. So, again, I'm not sure why that minimum of 2 per unit was established, if occupancy was only going to be for 1, but that's
Yeah, okay.
what the code says. The same thing came into question at National Church Residences. Because of the number of units, even though they were going to be mostly single occupancy, they still had to obtain a variance for those lacking parking spots of the number of units times 2.
And that was approved by the city council?
That was approved by City Council as part of the PUD approval.
I asked for one person.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so a total
Yeah.
of 3 people.
And, for example, we've got a lot of places in town that are 4 and 5 bedroom, but the zoning restricts to 3 unrelated persons. So it's not, it has to do with people and people and not bedrooms or a little bit about bedroom size. But nowadays, people don't really like to double up like they used to.
Sure.
They don't
Right.
like to do
Okay,
it.
but he's
And I
asking
would,
for 2 up and 1 down.
As I had mentioned too, I talked to Mr. Hines about the landscape requirement for parking of 25 cars or less or 7,000 square feet of parking area or less. There's a 4-foot perimeter buffer required between the property and the adjacent property. So as indicated on the plan, there's that required 4-foot buffer. There's proposal to plant 1 tree on the eastern property line and 2 trees on the southern property line. So he's fulfilling the requirements of the landscape ordinance
Good.
in that way too. So at least those parking spots will have a little shade.
Okay. Bruce. All right. Any more questions, anybody? Do we have a discussion we need to have, or do we want to discuss things as we go through the findings? If we're going to do it that way, can I have a proposed variance? Anybody want to make the craft the variance?
I move we grant a variance to a property located at 22 and a half Franklin Avenue, case number 06-09V, Zone R3. Richard Hines is the appellant. The appellant is requesting a variance from section 23.08.01A to convert 1 unit of a 2-family dwelling unit to rental purposes with 2 accessible and 2 non-accessible parking spaces where accessibility to all parking spaces is required. Note: City Water and Sewer Department recommends that the area not be paved due to a lack of stormwater control infrastructure. Construction type of the adjacent access alley and existing conditions.
So we're going to recommend that it be left gravelled.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to second that? Can I have a s-
I'll second.
Okay. Okay. Well then, what are the arguments for granting this variance? What's the practical difficulty or undue hardship? Let's don't all talk at once here. Is there a hardship for this property?
Well,
Well, we won't be able to utilize it as a two-family dwelling otherwise.
well, I don't know that that's really what we mean by the hardship, is it? Is there anything exceptional about the configuration of the property or the size of the property or?
Well, the size of the property doesn't, there isn't sufficient land area to provide parking.
So that's
with-
not a hardship, so, and it's no, the lot is no larger or smaller than others in the same vicinity.
Is it not? Let's see, what is it? It's 45, that's a little bit smaller.
Than other
By-
houses on Grosvenor and Franklin?
Aren't they
I don't
aren't they
think
usually 50 by 100?
so. On Franklin and Grosvenor, these are very
They're
old
not-
streets with narrow
Okay,
lots.
they're all that size. Steve, would they all be the same size? I don't know the answer. I was assuming it looked small, but maybe I'm wrong.
All down through that area, lot sizes vary tremendously. We have
They do
through
vary.
lots, we have some lots that go all the way from State up to Franklin.
So they're
So they're
deep.
huge. Others have had just very small portions
Right.
split off of them. As a matter of fact, for example, the case that keeps coming up in my mind a lot, 108 Grosvenor, where they couldn't provide any parking. Essentially, the building covered the lot. There wasn't hardly
And we
any
had
space
a
left.
very nice letter a couple of months ago from a former resident of the street explaining what had happened, that houses that had side yards or lots beside them got filled up with other houses eventually and eliminated the parking, essentially, over a period of time.
Well, this looks like...
In this case, this is not for lack of parking, it's just
Right.
the stacking is the
Exactly.
problem. Stacking is the
So you
problem.
can't say that the size is a hardship or the configuration.
Well, the hardship...
Terrain is the hardship. It's just simply the change of use.
The change of use is made, it's not, I think that the hardship is that the change of use isn't actually a change of use, it's a continuation of a use under a new regulation that didn't exist at the time.
But I think you can't argue
Yeah.
that, Muriel, because you can always refer back to when this particular thing did not exist.
Yeah, oh, I
And
agree.
treat it as if the law has not changed, when in
I agree.
fact it has.
I agree, and for houses that would be built on in such a way that they just had just slightly more room, it would be possible for them to accommodate this changed regulation with non-stacked parking. But the way this particular house is situated on its particularly small property, which is not the smallest in the neighborhood, but certainly is not the largest either, the circumstances are such that addressing the new requirements is difficult. Not to say
But everybody
impossible.
else who has a situation like this will be faced with the
Mhm.
same
Yeah.
new rules.
That's
So-
true. Will they all
That's
have
why
it?
there's stacked park across the alley.
Well,
Right.
they are grandfathered apparently. Lucky them.
Yep.
So,
So, okay, I'd like to do a hypothetical on this one. Hypothetically, the house will be rented if they were permitted. The house would be rented and there'd be a person living downstairs or a couple and two people living upstairs. And they'd wind up with possibly only 3 parking places anyway. I mean, only 3 cars being parked. But another hypothetical
maybe we
is
should give
they
them-
don't get a variance.
maybe we should consider a variance with 3 parking spaces.
Well,
That'd be my
we
suggestion.
could do that.
I don't know whether Mr. Hines is open to that.
Well, we could ask Mr. Hines. The consultation here is on the number of parking places. Trying to keep variances minimal is part of what we try to do. You have a property that seems like it has always been occupied by a family or a couple or something downstairs and tenants upstairs. And since there's the one bedroom downstairs, it seems appropriate that it would always be one tenant downstairs and possibly two upstairs. So you'd really only need 3 parking places if that were the case. Would you be comfortable with that?
Except that the law requires
Excepting that
two
the law
per
requires
unit,
2
but
per
we
unit. Yeah, but
could-
we could possibly give you a variance.
Yeah, they can reduce it to 3, I guess is what you're saying.
Right.
Because I don't really see any hardship.
No, I don't either. I agree
That
with you.
would not occur to any other people in a similar situation in this neighborhood.
And then
Many
the
people,
stacking
they
would
have
be
no
limited to the
parking
2
at all.
people.
I
that
don't
would
see
be
any
living in the one
exceptional
unit.
circumstance.
The only thing is, it's
And
only 2
people
cars
are-
walk.
what?
2 cars walk.
Right. One of them would park with themselves, and then there would be the stacked parking beside the other one.
Right, and they're...
You'd have
they're-
3.
Until
the-
a friend came over.
Well, I would give them some place to park for a friend,
There
actually.
there
Yeah,
is
that'd
some
be good.
opposition to this by people in the neighborhood who think that it would be a very bad idea.
Yes, I should have read that into the record
Yes,
earlier.
probably.
I neglected to do
Because
that.
they're
And,
quite strong on it.
Yes, there is a petition that was circulated. I am remiss. A statement of opposition was signed by 12 people. And a strong opposition to, on the basis that there's no undue hardship, because parking for 2 vehicles is easily possible currently. And they felt that the granting of a variance would clearly, materially undermine the public interest. The prohibition against stacked parking has the effect of making it possible for each tenant to have genuine access to an off-street parking space, reducing the possibility that rather than deal with difficulties of stacked parking, a tenant will park on the street, thus increasing parking congestion in the area. Indeed, parking congestion is substantial in the area. Residents and visitors of residents Grosvenor frequently end up parking on Franklin because they can find nothing on Grosvenor and the other way around. Finally, there's no question of the preservation of equal property rights. The property can be rented without the variance, just not to so many people, or it could be sold as a beginning family residence. For the above reasons and those presented by personal testimony, to be presented by personal testimony, but nobody's here tonight, we request the variance as to the number of dwelling units permitted in a structure be denied. Yeah. I think that pretty much is what they said. They feel that the appellant's appropriate course is to attempt to prevail on city council to change the requirement about the stacked parking.
Well, I think that's already
But-
been considered.
Yeah,
and-
that has been, so.
And the restriction against
Mhm.
stacked parking was put in place to control the number of
Right.
people in a given area.
Right. So, anyway, so that's why a variance is required if it were to be granted. Okay, so,
Are you taking comments on that?
since I messed up, and yes, we're gonna not do this according to procedure.
That petition was presented to me just yesterday afternoon. Some of the signatures, if you look at it, were there from in April. Others were just added in the last few days.
Is that significant?
It's just something that I'm pointing out. The number of people that were opposed to this when it was originally advertised, those signature dates there are very few. This was to be heard two, maybe 3 months ago. But in any case, I'm just pointing out the dates on the signatures. One of those signatory to the petition, Mr. William Safranek, I believe is the author of the document. When he brought it to the office yesterday afternoon, he said that now that he looked at the case, he really wasn't necessarily opposed to it. He didn't think that it was necessarily that bad an idea, and he asked me why I had not gotten the appellant in touch with him or his whatever group he represents, and I basically made the statement that, I didn't know that they wanted to speak to Mr. Hines. So Mr. Hines did receive, and he can tell you all about it. I don't know if you called him or he called me. Mr. Safranek last night called Mr. Hines and asked to meet with him this morning. And they had a discussion about Mr. Safranek and the petitioner's signatures of opposition. My understanding was that Mr. Safranek made a statement that if he did not show up tonight, they essentially weren't opposed to it, even though that document had already been presented. I'll let
Is he
Mr.
speaking
Hines...
for all of this?
Well, I remember
signatories?
in having a discussion with him, he told me that he could amend that by crossing off his name, his wife's name, and his brother's name. That was a statement that Mr. Safranek made to me. So at least those three people could be eliminated. But he never went through with that, and took that, lined those out, or submitted anything else. He did have a discussion with Mr. Hines this morning. I think that might be
We probably ought to
important.
hear from Mr. Hines about that then. Thank you. Would you come back up, Mr. Hines, and tell us about your conversation?
Yes, Mr. Safranek did call me last night, and we met at 9:30 this morning at Franklin Avenue, and we talked about what I was trying to do, and showed him what I was trying to do and everything, and he told me basically the same thing Mr. Pearson said, that he is, I think he's called it in the process of reconsidering his statement that he turned in, about it. And he indicated to me, as he did to Mr. Pearson there, that, he could not get in touch with all these people on this petition before tonight. So he could cross his name off, his wife's name, his brother's name.
I see.
And that he also told me that he would not be here tonight to oppose this. And he's not.
I see. Okay, well, no one else is here, but possibly, yeah. They didn't feel they needed to be because they'd already put their name down, but also possibly
I
had
don't
they...
think you can speculate on that.
No.
If people signed a petition and turned
Yeah.
it in with their names on it, I think they're assuming that we
Yes.
take
I
them
think
seriously
so.
unless they show up to say, gosh, I didn't really mean that.
If they
Now,
show
Mr.
up, we can think they're a little more serious about it, than when they
Well-
didn't just do something to please their neighbor,
Right, and if
because he
Mr.
was the one circulating the petition.
Well, if Mr. Safranek told you that he wants to take his name off and his wife and his brother, that's fine, but I don't think you can then just say, oh, well, the rest of these people...
No, that's what he said. He didn't
Didn't mean
have the
it.
time
Right.
between like this afternoon
Sure,
and
I
tonight
understand that,
to
right.
get a hold of all the people that were on the, that had signed it.
Yep.
So, he told me that he wouldn't be here tonight to oppose
Right.
this.
It was his brother?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
It's the people at 34 Grosvenor, and there are three of them.
Those are the Safranics, but
Right.
there's three at 30, oh, I see. They're all
They're at
three.
34.
I see, got it. So we still have 32 and 40, Joanne Prisley.
It seemed like all those, well, the bigger majority of people that signed that was from Grosvenor instead of Franklin.
Yeah, there we got 1, 2, and Robert Finsterwald on 3. There's 3 from Franklin. One of them, Helen Gray, a name I can't read, and Robert Finsterwald. Okay, well, now it's all completely muddy. Thank you very much. Okay, appreciate it. Well,
Shall we go back
this
to the
is-
findings?
we could go back to the findings, or we could we don't want to have this wait another month. But I could suggest that we could give these people an opportunity to say, yeah, I really do mean this, or no, I really don't, by continuing this to next week. Do we have room on next week's agenda?
There's no.
Next week.
There is no next week?
No.
Oh, it's been dropped because that's, oh,
They can wait until
I see.
July 11th.
So our next meeting is not until our regularly scheduled July meeting, and there's no extra meeting in July either.
Not right now.
Okay.
You could continue this case for just a week, just this one, to meet sometime between now and
Well,
July.
it seems to me that whether these people now have changed their minds or not, they have made an argument that either is included and to be considered as part of the findings because they're valid or they're not valid. So it seems to me if we go through the findings and look at the findings quite fairly, then we
Yeah.
don't need to
We
continue
don't need
this
to.
meeting.
We don't need to know whether or not they really feel the way they felt in
Right.
April.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
All right, that's fine. I'm comfortable with that if everybody else is. Then let's continue with the findings. Where were we? We were trying to decide whether or not there was a practical difficulty or undue hardship.
We already talked about that.
Yes. Oh, I know we discussed that, but I'm not sure what agreement we came to.
I don't know that
I know
we
you
did
thought
come to
one
agreement.
thing and I thought
I
one
don't think
thing.
there's any hardship or difficulty
Okay.
that is different from anybody else in this neighborhood.
Are we agreed on
And
that?
the property could be used, as it was before, so.
And has everybody agreed with that or not?
We don't all have to agree
No,
with that.
I just would
We'll
like to
come
know
the
what.
vote.
I just like to know what the other people think. I'm just curious. Because no one said anything. No one's gonna say anything.
Using
Okay.
it like it was. It
Using-
was a relative living in one unit.
Yeah.
Can't do that.
You can't, so it's
We're
never
gonna
gonna be.
dedicate it to a relative and.
He
Yeah,
said
it'll
he's
never
out
be
of
that.
relatives.
So he's
He
out of
doesn't have
relatives.
any more.
Okay.
No, another family.
So that's the
He
practical
said he's out of
difficulty is he's
family.
run out
Well,
of
it could
family.
be other family buying that house and doing the same.
Okay. On to exceptional circumstances. Are there exceptional circumstances or conditions applying to the property or its intended use that do not in general apply to properties in the same zoning district? Absolute dead silence. It sounds like no one feels that there are circumstances that don't apply to other properties. Just the same.
If you had another duplex that was in this situation, that it had family members in it, and it was a change of use, it would be in exactly the same situation
Mhm.
as this one, unless there was some particular thing, wouldn't it?
Is there anything about the property or its intended use that don't apply to properties in the same zoning district? Well,
Are we considering 3 or 4 now?
no, everyone would be in exactly the same fix.
I'm saying.
Say everyone would be required to do exactly the same thing. Well, with the possible exception that of the two units, one is really suited for a single
Okay, so
person.
we could say that that's exceptional because there's not, he's only requesting 3
Yeah.
people, and he's being required to furnish 4. Maybe we could say
Would
that.
be exceptional because it's located where 2 of the most crowded streets in Athens happen to be.
Well, is that exceptional? I don't think that's
That makes it exceptional, that makes it rather common, right?
Right.
in that area.
Well, so, what
But-
you're
but
trying to
the
do
idea
is
that-
decide what's fair for this property in this neighborhood. What applies to other properties and what applies only to this one. What's different about it?
Yeah,
Why
well,
does it deserve a variance?
it is,
Why did the people across the alley merit it?
That, I don't think you can necessarily do that, Roger, because I'm assuming that
That's
is a
probably
grandfather
Might
property.
not be able to do it, but I can certainly observe it.
yeah, I
Right.
think it is highly probable that it's grandfathered. And that makes for something that seems in some ways unfair, but the intent of grandfathering is to even things out and make them more fair.
R1 right across the alley.
Oh, I think it is a different zone. I don't know that it's R1 though. It's something else.
But that probably has been stacked before that law came into place anyway.
It is. B3? No,
That's
across the
R1.
alley.
It probably is
This is
R1.
R1.
Right, because the rest of that
Yes.
zone is R1.
Is that what that is?
Sure.
Yeah, it's R1.
Just that front end is R3.
So,
And I think the difficulty that we always get into on this board is that you're sympathetic to the person who's bringing the case, and you're sympathetic to the circumstances. And then the question is, how far do you want your sympathy to take you, and how strictly do you want to hang on to the findings?
well, you know, whether you want to hang on to the findings or not, really doesn't have anything to do with it. You're required to hang on to the findings. If you can't make an argument that fits the findings, then you can't do it. That's the way it works. That's why we get sort of contorted sometimes. But I think what you said about exceptional circumstances does work for exceptional circumstances. They've got this property that, because of the code, is required to have 4 parking places, and it really is only a 2. It's
Well,
only
it might accommodate
2.
more, but he's asking for
Yeah.
2 and more.
Okay, so that's why that's an exceptional circumstance. But then when we go on to preservation of equal property rights, would literally interpreting the code deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same vicinity?
Not if everybody now has to comply with the new rules.
Right. And would granting the variance convey a special privilege?
So I guess that's why I suggested that we might want to throw out the motion that we've proposed and make a new motion suggesting 3 spaces, if Mr. Hines would be
But
agreeable
Steve,
to
you
it.
say we can't give 3.
Yes, we can.
You say we've got to have 2 for the one and 2 for the other.
Unless we
That's
do a
what the law
variance.
says, but we're
that's what
being
the
asked to
variance is
give.
for.
I suppose what you could do, it wouldn't be outside the spirit of the code necessarily, because it does say 1 for each occupant.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's within the spirit of the
Right.
code, 1 person, 1 car.
right.
The 2 minimum per unit, I have no idea why that.
Well, we
Because
have it,
of
so we have
So-
to, that's why we're here.
So the rules and regulations makes it possible for us to specify 3, and then it would be legal,
Sure, that's what
as
we're here.
opposed to
Yeah, I
4.
think so too. The
Well,
board-
that's what I
yeah,
was
The
troubled
board's
with
permitted
that.
to attach safeguards and conditions
Okay.
to make sure that the order, the determination of the board, is fair and equitable and properly or easily or equally enforced. So, yeah, you can attach conditions and safeguards.
Thank you.
Well,
So I
Are we
go
gonna
along
throw
with
it out?
Betty's suggestion that we
Well,
would you like
modify the permit and
would you like to rephrase it, Betty?
Well, I think we would have to agree to 1, we'd have
Yeah.
to ask Mr. Hines. if
he's
he's
agreeable, he's nodding his head.
Okay. 2, I think we have to agree to dismiss the first motion.
Is-
somebody has to rescind their
Our-
second or rescind their
Who made this motion?
Well, the
John,
motion
did you
was
make-
made by
No,
Roger
Roger.
and seconded,
So you
and you
have to
seconded it,
rescind
right?
your
Yeah.
motion, Roger.
So you could rescind yours, just say,
Do I have to read through it?
nah, just say I rescind it.
I would like to rescind the reading that I provided earlier regarding 22 and a half Franklin Avenue.
Would you like to rescind your second?
Yes.
Okay.
Does anybody want
Now,
to make a
Betty,
motion?
we'll let you word it this
I
time.
don't have anything that tells me what's going
Oh,
on here. Okay. I move that we grant a variance to 22 and 22 and a half Franklin Avenue from section 230801A to convert 1 unit of a 2-family dwelling to rental purposes with 2 accessible and 1 non-accessible. Well, I guess it would actually, yeah, it would really be 1 accessible and 2 non-accessible parking spaces where accessibility.
No, actually, you had it right the first
Oh,
time.
okay. What did I say? 2 non-accessible.
2 accessible and 1
2
non-accessible.
accessible and 1 non-accessible I don't see how that's going to work. Parking spaces where accessibility to all parking spaces is required. And we also had added to that the area would not be required to be paved, but would be allowed because of stormwater control infrastructure and various other considerations to be gravelled.
And also, do we want to say with the understanding that 3 tenants are what's
Yes.
expected to occupy?
Yes, with the
this?
condition that only 3 occupants be in these 2 units together. No, that's not right. That a total of 3 people be allowed to occupy the 2 units.
I second.
Okay, all right. Let's assume that we've gone through.
Well, how did this change the
only
hardship
thing-
or special circumstances?
I don't think it,
Still
Wouldn't
the
change
same.
its readings, would it? Still giving a variance.
yeah, we're still doing the variance. And then we were on preservation of equal
Question.
property rights.
Oh.
For exceptional circumstances, one of the things you listed was that there were 3 tenants, but you need 4 spaces.
Yes, and so that's changed.
So if
Thank
wanna
you.
Just remove that.
Yeah, let's go back down through this. Oh, I hate to do this to everybody, but let's go back down through this again. Practical difficulty or undue hardship has to pertain to the specific piece of property.
Or the use.
Or the
intended
use.
Okay.
The intended use is a continuation of the use of the last 45 years.
So its use won't be changing.
Well, it's considered to be changed because it is no longer going to be owner occupied. It would be entirely rental occupied.
It'll change legally, but not physically, maybe.
Yeah,
With no increase of occupants.
Yeah.
yeah. And the hardship is that because of the space that's available there. Actually, if it weren't for that little stoop, they probably could park 3 abreast back there. Would there be room enough? No, even with that, they wouldn't be able to, they wouldn't be,
According to
they
the
wouldn't be able to
spaces,
have,
yeah,
they wouldn't
yeah.
be able to have the crabapple lawn and all that stuff.
Yeah, they have to have 27 foot,
And they,
39 foot.
yeah. Well, they just don't quite have enough space. And it is a short lot. There are longer lots on that street. To me, the hardship is just that the house, as it was constructed, at the time it was constructed, fit for the use, and it no longer does. I don't know if everybody agrees that that's a hardship, but it sure seems to me to make it difficult. But that could be the intent of the code also, to make it difficult.
I believe that's true.
Anyway, practically speaking, it's difficult to get that parking in there because of the various requirements that have been added on since the building was put there at a time when it would work the way it was, and it doesn't work anymore. To me, that needs to be addressed, but we'll know when we vote whether or not everyone agrees. The exceptional circumstances, we seem to have fixed with our, so that's the problem. There
Well,
must-
I think you could still argue that the fact that he is required to have 4 spaces because there are 2 units.
Yes, and that's what
you
we
could-
have to.
And he is only asking for 3 tenants. I think that's still an argument. Therefore, we are
Yeah,
suggesting
okay, I
that
agree.
perhaps he only have 3 parking spaces.
Literally interpreted, the code would deprive the appellant of the right to rent to 3 people, as opposed to renting to only 2 people before and living in it. If there were a property that could provide for unstacked parking places, they would be able to do that.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be on Franklin.
No.
Wouldn't be on Grosvenor either.
Well, will granting this variance convey a special privilege?
Just maintaining it like it's been. I don't know, it'd be a special privilege to maintain something in the fashion that it's been utilized.
Well, everybody else on Franklin who has to come up against this rule is going to wish that they could get the same privileges.
So, the minimum variance, then we come to, is the variance the minimum required to make reasonable use of the property? So, reasonable use of the property. This property, which has been used for 45 years as a duplex, can now reasonably only be used as a single-family dwelling? Is that the idea? Is that reasonable?
No.
I have a hard time wrapping my mind around that being reasonable, but,
Well,
Single family wants to live there anyway.
well, we're suggesting a rather minimal variance. Right?
yeah, okay. If you,
4 is more than 3.
we've
We
minimized,
reduced it,
we've
minimized it.
reduced it to a minimal,
Right.
to a greater, smaller amount. All right. In order to preserve their right to continue to use it as it's been used. The variance sought should not be of a general or recurring nature such the situation would more reasonably be handled by changing the
Did you
law.
miss the detriment to that?
Huh?
Did you miss one?
We were working I didn't do absence of detriment, did I? Would granting the variance be of a substantial detriment to adjacent properties? I don't think it would be of any detriment to the one we've got the photograph of.
Well,
Except for the.
We have these arguments here, and
Yes.
we don't know.
3 of whom live on the street.
Right.
There were 3 people who are residents of that street who signed it. 2 of them signed it in April, and 1 signed just recently.
But the other people are also located, down at that end of Grosvenor, so they probably do feel the consequences all the time of too many people.
Well, it is right on the
street.
alley, and the folks who can't find a parking place will just go down or up the alley. No, that's down the alley to East State Street, so. So we consider, I don't think we generally consider the next street over to be adjacent, do we?
Well, the little streets are close together, and they suffer from
They
the
are
same
close, actually, and the houses
R3.
often back up onto each other. In this
Yeah.
case, not, but sometimes they do.
Right.
In this case, they don't. Well, there are 3 people on the street who felt that there'd be a detriment. The ones that,
Well, we may not agree with that, but I don't, you just have to acknowledge that we do have these.
we do have some.
I
who
felt
there
very
would be-
strongly about something. You can bet your socks I'd be up here letting you know about it. I wouldn't just sign a piece of paper and walk away.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. On the other hand, we do need to note, there could be people who couldn't come, who did feel strongly enough to sign a petition. But the fact that there's absolutely nobody here, I think, may be significant. 3 parking places, if it's done the way we're discussing, will be provided for 3 people who'd be living there. It seems to me that should reduce detriment to a fairly reasonable, there shouldn't be detriment. There isn't going to be a change in the way it's being used. So there isn't a detriment that I can see. But we have to wait and see if everybody agrees with me or not. General nature, is the variance something that could be should be
No.
considered general or recurring?
No, it's already been addressed by the city council, that's why we have to deal with this.
And addressed by us for ad nauseum here. Okay, then, we're through. Are we ready to vote? I think we must be. Let's start from the other end tonight.
I
Now,
vote no.
okay, Roger?
Yes.
I would know also.
Betty?
I think I'm going to vote yes.
And I also am going to vote yes. So, the variance is granted. And we didn't say substantial conformance, but obviously, it's for 3 parking places, gravelled, landscaped.
3 can be gravel. 3 can be gravel. 4 is clear.
Okay, so he doesn't
Excellent.
need us for that.
He doesn't. Well, that worked out very well then.
Okay, what about this Home Street?
That one's done. You'll be getting your notice shortly. Thank you. All right, our last one is for 65 Home Street. It's a Zone R1 case. Linda Keffer's our appellant, and asking to permit a covered patio in a circumstance where inadvertently the patio is already covered. Steve, did you want to give us any background on this, or? Thanks.
This particular property came to my attention while going over to the library one day, to be real honest with you. And I noticed a roof held up by 4 posts covering what was formerly just a concrete slab. And I didn't recall a permit being issued on it, so I believe I asked Brian Zulik, who's one of my officers that lives in that neighborhood, to make contact. And in discussing the issue with the owner, Ms. Keffer, she had been out of town for a period of time and had returned to find that family members had built this covering over her outdoor uncovered patio as a gift while she was gone. And in any case, it still needed to be permitted, and it couldn't be permitted once I figured up the lot coverage. Now, as you can see, this is a lot, it's a little different than some in that neighborhood. This is all an R1 zone, except for right across the street, it's B3 general business. The library, Putnam Square, Marahos, Bob Evans, that's B3 right across the street. But this is in the R1 neighborhood. That lot and the one next door, from the original platting of the subdivision, with 2 lots, had been subdivided down into 4.
2 had been subdivided to 4.
I think if you look on the drawing, the two lots on Home Street closest to Lincoln were somewhere along the line divided in half. But originally platted, like most of the lots in that neighborhood, twice the size of this lot. So it has a disadvantage to begin with. And I think on there's one sheet there where I did calculate the lot size in square footage. 8,000 square feet is the permitted minimum, and I think this lot was around 5,000. It's on one of those. The sheet that has a site plan, and I just did a little sketch of a covered building. The calculations there are there for percentage of lot coverage. So it's already an area, a lot deficient in area. The addition of this unenclosed, open-sided, it's really just a roof over top of concrete slab, increased it to, I think it's 36.7%. So it's 6.7% greater than what's permitted. Essentially, there's no detriment in that it doesn't necessarily block light, doesn't block air, wind, circulation, ventilation to the neighbor at all. It has to remain open-sided or flood-proof in some manner because it's in a special flood hazard area. So, in doing the permitting also, there'll be a notation that this is number one, it's so small, it's an exempt structure from flood-proofing requirements. And number two, it is flood-proof because it's open-sided. It has no enclosed sides.
So there's essentially no problem with the structure in any way, excepting that because of the size of the property, it winds up making it covered too.
Right.
Too much of the lot is covered.
Probably if one of these, if the lot were one, like the normal size in the neighborhood, normal size lots, the coverage wouldn't have been a problem.
And the fact of the patio itself, the concrete slab and the driveway pre-existing this, I mean, the lot's not considered covered by all this concrete. The lot is only considered covered when you
Right.
put a roof over the concrete.
Yeah, and again, that has to do with definitions in the zoning code.
Yeah.
A structure, which is what you're looking at in terms of including in lot coverage. The definition of a structure is something attached to the ground or attached to something that's attached to the ground. So
And-
it could be made out of, it could be 36-inch poured concrete walls, or it could be something as
As open as this.
little, as
And-
little
and-
substance to it as this structure.
And the object of the code in restricting the coverage to 30% is to avoid having problems with light and air and all of the other things that you were talking about.
Right.
For the neighbors, not to impact on the neighbors, light and air and so on.
And also, it's to help the owner themselves to preserve some open space, so you don't get to the situation where you don't have any outdoor space to live in.
But built the way it is, it sounds as if you were describing it in such a way to indicate that it doesn't enclose the open space or get in the way of the light and the air and so on.
Right.
Could
Yeah.
be called sheltered outside space.
Yeah, it kind of looks like, it looks like just a little small shelter house is what it looks like if you'd gone by and looked at it.
Yeah, it's exactly what it looks like.
Yeah.
Decorative.
Air can move through, and really, it's just, to be real honest with you, it's the definition
It's rather,
that caused it to come into play to be included in lot coverage.
yeah.
A lot of times, I know there's been discussion, and people have made comment about slab on grade or parking areas. Shouldn't that be included in lot coverage? Zoning code definition of things that are included in lot coverage are structures only.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a problem before. It could have a big tent, a temporary tent over it, and that wouldn't be a structure.
Just a hypothetical question, I mean, not to do with this case, but if, let's say, this variance was denied, what course of action did you take?
Course of action that I would take? I wouldn't take anything except issue the resolution of the board. Each one of those resolutions that I do,
So that
that's
thing is not going to
refused,
be turned down,
notes
right?
the code section on the bottom of it, says, anyone aggrieved by decision of the board may appeal to the Court of Common Pleas, I think it says Court of Jurisdiction, within 20 days of the date. So your refusal can only be changed by an appeal to court or compliance. If you said no, it would have to be,
Come
the roof
down.
would have to be taken off, or
Yeah.
the thing would have to be removed somehow. You could put it on a trailer and drive it out of town.
No, those posts are in the ground. They won't go on a trailer.
There's a chainsaw.
Okay.
So, and to be real honest with you, really, it's an unfortunate thing that the permit wasn't done in advance, and
Who's
was-
responsible for that?
I think there may be some statement from the appellant.
A well-intended family member wanting to do a gift.
He did it himself? He didn't work with a general contractor on it?
I'm not sure about that, because it just appeared without a permit. I have no knowledge, personal knowledge of who did the work. Now, Ms. Keffer might be able to answer that question.
All right, thank you very
You're
much, and
welcome.
we'll ask Ms. Keffer. Would you like to come up now and, make your, yes, please, make your statement, state your name and address for the camera, you're on camera.
Oh, great. I'm Linda Keffer. Good evening this evening. I live at 65 Home Street. At Christmas time, my brother was just trying to be a nice brother. And when I bought my home several years ago, it had been completely redone by my daughter, who owned it before. That house had been a condemned building, and now it's quite a nice little structure, and it was completely revamped. And when I moved in, we turned the gravel driveway into a cement driveway. And at the end of the driveway, I wanted an area so that I could go outside and have a picnic table and my grandchildren, my family over. And my brother thought it was ridiculous to have a table with an umbrella that didn't have enough coverage for everybody that was going to be there. And so this year, I was granted this gift, and it truly was just a surprise. And my brother built it with a friend of his from high school, and that he's known all his life.
So he wasn't knowledgeable about our building codes?
My brother? No. No, not at all. So that's how it came to be, and it is nice, and it actually, my neighbors all use it, so they all come over, and I've got seating for, you know, people that want to sit out in the evening. Actually, it gives me an outside space. When you were talking, it would limit my space. It gives me space where I can sit out, and it's on the corner.
Sounds nice. I'd like to have one of those myself.
Well, stop on down.
All the neighborhood does.
It does.
apparently.
They
Yeah.
do. They come over, and I sit right on the corner there by the library, down by the Athens
Well,
County Library.
you've been sitting here listening to us talk about absence of detriment. I would imagine that you would think that your neighbors, if they were here, would say that it was not a detriment to the neighborhood because that's where they like to go to sit in the
You know,
afternoon.
they hang out when they're not working, or they see me out or something. That's where we all well, I sit between, because my house is on a corner, I have people adjacent on either side of me, and actually one building over even. People come over and sit under it. It gave us space, and it created a space for us.
Yeah.
Because before, my brother was right, the umbrella just didn't
Well,
do it.
yeah, it is.
So.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Keffert? Anything that hasn't already been covered? No? Well, somebody may think of something. We'll call you back.
Okay,
Thank
sure.
you. Is there anybody else here who would like to speak in support of this variance, or in general comment, or in opposition? And if not, barring questions that come up in the discussion, we have discussion from the floor is closed. And we're ready to, how about somebody just making a variance proposal, and then we can discuss it.
I don't have the paper.
I move that we grant a variance to the
That should
property
get
at
you to
65 Home Street from Section 2311, Table A, Schedule of Bulk Controls, to permit a covered patio creating 36.7% lot coverage, where 30% is the permitted maximum.
Second.
Okay, so moved and seconded. What's the practical difficulty here?
It's already
built.
It's already there. That's about as
Well, it
practical
has
as
to have something to do with the property itself.
Well, it's already built on the property itself.
Yeah.
Well, it
So
does
there
look
it
as
is.
if other properties, right, those four little properties are littler,
They're,
and they're half as big as the rest of the properties
They are.
around them.
to have a covered patio in this particular property would be next to impossible to have anything of a size sufficient to be useful.
She doesn't have that good.
She doesn't have any yard, really. She has a small front yard and a little bit on the side. That's her usable outdoor living space. Is that corner back there?
And it's a unique building. It's not enclosed.
Yeah. So, I mean, there just really isn't any place else to do it, and anything of a smaller size would really be pretty useless. It would have been absolutely no problem had it not been subdivided in such a weird way. But anyway, it was. So that's the situation. Exceptional circumstance.
I think we
That's
figured
the
that
same thing.
out.
Yeah, that's
The
it.
division of the property
Right.
itself.
Yeah. Preservation of equal property rights, interpreting the code literally would deprive the appellant of a right to have a,
Well, other people along there do have twice the space on their lots as
Yep.
this one, so this
okay.
is not a special privilege.
Okay, and as far as minimum variance goes, the difference between what is allowed and what is being used is, what did we decide, what percent was that, 6%?
Pretty 6%, and as we say,
6% more.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's a very small lot. And I
Okay.
do have to say, the property is so enormously improved. It's an adorable little house now. Very cute.
That's really, really nice.
Yeah.
Generally, is it of a general nature, well, absence of detriment, would the granting of the variance be a detriment to adjacent properties? Not in my opinion, but,
I think so.
and the purposes of the code, I think Steve has testified to the purposes, and it doesn't seem it would impair them, nor the public interest. Public interest seems to be well served by that. General nature, would the variance be of a general or recurring nature
No.
to be handled by the law change?
No.
Okay. Can you start, Betty?
Yes, I vote yes.
If it's gonna make that gray kitty cat happy, I'm happy.
Okay.
Oh, great pity.
And how about,
Yes.
I guess it's going to be 100% tonight.
looks
on
like it,
this
doesn't
one.
it? All right,
Yes.
and I too vote yes. I think it's a perfect, your brother makes grand patio covers. It's very attractive. It is right in keeping with the rest of the house. It looks very nice. And I hope you continue to enjoy it, so you have your variance. Okay, all right.
You're all
Okay.
welcome down anytime you
Oh,
want.
thank you. Some of us are actually from the neighborhood. You better watch out. You might be taken up on that.
I
Okay.
was mowing grass the other day, and a gentleman came clear across, clear back the property, came clear across, and just wanted to thank me for, I said, I can't take, he said, I look at this every time I go by, and I wanted to show you the all of my work.
So what you
Oh,
wishing
lovely.
for Christmas next year?
Maybe, I don't know, I didn't wish for this year.
Well, I hope you have a Merry Christmas, whatever it is that your brother
Thank you
decides to do
very
this
much.
time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Well, now, we get to do a disposition of minutes from the May 26th meeting at which I was not present. Because my son was getting married, I want you all to know that he's hitched.
Never mind.
Very thoroughly,
excuses.
wonderfully, and happily hitched. But has everyone had a chance to read
I
them?
read both of them, I guess I didn't find anything wrong in there, so.
You read them.
Both of them,
Have enough of the others who were present read them to be able to approve them for now?
I've read them.
Okay, well, do I have a vote to approve then? Everybody agree?
I move to approve the minutes of May 26 and March 14 in that order, but
Okay,
Since I was there, I've seconded.
great. And who else was present?
I was there in
You were there.
spirit.
We kept him in the cage.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
well,
was in
then,
quarantine.
it looks as if the minutes have been approved. We have one other item on this agenda. If it's not actually written, it's something that I wanted to take up, and I don't see my agenda.
oh,
While
There
you're
it
looking
is.
for it, I'd like to ask everyone's opinion on the board, what they feel about that little piddly flag on that pole. It's, to me,
What is
it's
that
way,
doing up there?
I mean, it's
Do
way
you mean
under
on that
scale.
tower?
You
You know,
the-
the tower
on
that we said we wanted a flag put on, and they put off flag on it,
Oh,
but
they got a
it's
flag.
so
I haven't seen it. I haven't been
under
there.
scale.
That has to be a joke.
Did somebody,
I wish we would have stipulated.
It's disproportionate
a
to the
size, yes.
pole. I agree
I
with
wish-
him
and I don't think we did
wholeheartedly. The
say
first
that.
time I've seen it, I thought, gee.
You know?
I want one about the size of
Too
that
late to
one
do
on the
that
way to
now.
Columbus,
yeah,
that car
that's the
dealer.
size I figured it would have
That's
to
right.
be. Well,
McDormand Chevrolet.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
well,
I can look at the application that they submitted and see if there's an indication of the
I
size
don't
of the
think
flag.
I
We
don't-
didn't say anything
I've read it
about
recently. I don't think there was anything
It could
about
have
it.
been a 3x4.
but it would be really, is there any way of expressing
The only-
dismay,
only way around it would be,
disappointment,
I
and a
do think
desire
we
to have it?
stipulated 6-foot trees.
I think the tree commission overrode
Were
us.
Oh, they
they,
did?
I think so.
they overruled, it's supposed to be
I-
taller?
I
or-
don't know, I wanted giant trees and.
Was that, okay.
and
Well, I
the
think we
tree-
said
But
6-foot
that
trees,
that
so it's
somehow,
like-
large trees, I think, is what was
We
required.
didn't get the trees.
We didn't get the trees.
We won't
because
say
they
anything
said-
about the trees
I
if you
didn't
make
see
the flag a
anything,
little bit.
I didn't see anything about the size of the trees in the minutes,
Why
though.
don't you just take the flag
But
off?
I thought I
we
remembered
did.
that we discussed the
I thought
size
we
of the
said
trees.
size.
We discussed it, whether it was in the stipulation.
It may not have been in the
Let's let
stipulation.
Steve talk so we.
What happened was, I believe, you deferred to the tree commission
Right.
to identify the appropriate species and size.
And they put in
Now,
2-foot
it has
trees.
been brought to my attention by the tree commission
They don't want
that
those 2-foot
tho-
trees.
those
They want
trees
bigger.
are very small and were not planted to their specifications. I find nothing in the record of the tree commission where they, in writing, specified the type of tree and the size of the tree and the caliper of the tree. So I'm going to have to go back to the appellant, and this is something the tree commission has asked about, because they're concerned about the size of the trees too.
Well,
To
they-
find out if, because at the zoning board meeting, when I read the minutes, it said that the trees would be installed in accordance with the recommendations of the tree commission.
And the appellant said that he would have absolutely no problem with doing whatever the tree commission said they
Right.
wanted to have done.
Right, so what I have to find out is what did the tree commission want to have done?
Yeah.
Those are about the size of a bush.
And it was, and the whole reason it was discussed was because they had originally proposed putting in bushes, and we said, no bushes, we want sizable
Trees,
trees.
so that it would
Because the,
obscure the,
yeah, the idea is
Building.
to cover up
30
that.
years for those
yeah.
pieces.
that was the intent, was to obscure the fence and the
That
building.
fence was to,
And
was
that
to
didn't.
screen the fence, that fence won't be screened for 20 years. 30
Yeah.
years. Okay, the
Right,
the
and I know there
intent
was
was to have
discussion,
the
there were
thing
those same
screened.
species of trees right across the bike path, and the whole idea was. to-
They're firs.
Yeah, so I'm still working on that on behalf of the tree
Okay,
commission.
good.
What I'm probably gonna have to do is ask Mr. Pitcher to provide to me what he had mentioned in the minutes was the recommendation of the tree commission. I can't find it in the tree commission records, I can't find it in their minutes, I can't find it in their files. Hopefully, Mr. Pitcher, when responding to that, said, yes, I will abide by those recommendations I have already received from the tree commission. Hopefully, he kept that document.
Well, and if we wait 15 or 20 years, they'll be 6 foot high. They grow about 6 inches a year.
Okay,
And I will at
well,
the same time then check and see if there was some
No.
stipulation, although, to be
gets
real
right
honest
down
with you,
to
I
the
doubt it,
insurance.
because that was an offer that
Yeah,
Mr.
like
Pitcher
you.
made just that evening.
I see.
Just
Okay.
that, remember, he said, well, if we go with this type of pole, I can put a flag on it. But I don't think there was any discussion about the size of the flag.
I don't think there was
No,
either.
I'm gonna
Okay,
take it
well,
down.
it's a pity. They should take it off. That's a
Yep.
desecration.
It's not in good taste.
No.
I'll be ready to go.
I
The-
can, to be real honest with you, I might be able to do some research on flag etiquette. I'm sure there's something in rules of etiquette about
There
the size of
probably
the
is.
flag
Well, he
compared
brought
to
a
the height and
picture, I
stuff.
guess, if I remember, he brought a picture with a different example. The flag
And it
was
showed,
pretty
Yeah.
and
size.
the, and the,
It's not-
and the
Yeah.
flag was proportional to the flagpole.
Yeah, I don't recall
So-
seeing anything like that.
I can find out, I mean, if it's in there, we can require him to put,
He should have something proportional.
in there what he presented
He implied
that
to
night.
us that he would, so. There is one other thing that I just wanted to bring up, and that is the fact of the possibility of there being a second alternate, that possibly the mayor has a candidate, but it would be interesting to me, and I think probably for everyone, if someone from the north side or the west side were to volunteer to become a member of our board. All they need to do is to contact you or the mayor's office directly? How do they go about doing it? If somebody
anyone-
were to wanting to volunteer to sit right here and help us decide these cases once a month. That's all they have to do, just once a month.
Any citizen that would like to be a member of any city board or commission can submit to the appropriate appointing agency their request for the case of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Those appointments are mayoral in nature and confirmed by council. What the mayor asks for is when he receives applications that you essentially submit a short resume, so he has some idea what your background might be and is it appropriate and applicable to these kinds of decisions, or maybe just to show that it's not contrary to
Okay.
the public service of of a regular citizen. I know the mayor has had one person indicate interest in the position, and it may not hurt for people to go ahead and submit something in writing to the mayor, because Mr. Shaffey had indicated earlier tonight that he may not be able to continue as the existing alternate.
Oh,
And he's
terrific.
definitely not going to be here for 3 months.
He's going to miss 3 months, and he's wondering then,
So we
should
need one
he
then.
resign
Yes.
completely, or should he just request,
Well, I
a
think-
leave for 3
I-
months?
At the moment, I think it'd probably be a good idea if it were a 3-month leave, because we don't want to have nobody, let's don't.
But that'd be
That
all the more
starts in,
reason to try
That's
to
all the
get
more
this
reason to
second
get the second
Yeah, it's in
alternate,
the-
and then,
it's in the fall.
and that's all the more reason for us to be interested still in having other applicants. So if there's anybody out there who's interested, here's your chance. We'd really love to have another applicant for the position of the alternate. And you really don't have to plan on being required to sit and listen to the cases and vote on them immediately, but
Yeah, Alternates can, by the ordinance, participate in a discussion. For example, Mr. Shaffey was here this evening. He could have opted to stay.
Yes.
He could participate in the discussion and the conversation. He's just not permitted to
right.
vote.
And even if you aren't permitted to vote, having another person to have, to fill out our discussion would be useful, particularly if it were somebody representing the north or the west side, which is a little bit underrepresented on our board. It would be terrific. So I would really like it if we could get anybody out there watching, if you're interested, please call the mayor's office and apply. Thank you. This
One
is
thing
my-
I had discovered too was that in 2003, and I hadn't realized it until I actually had mentioned to the board at the last meeting that I would recommend an amendment to the Planning Commission to allow for the second alternate. I pulled the code up, and here it had been done in 2003. I don't know how I overlooked that, to be
Well-
honest with you, but it must have been something that we were thinking about at the time. So there's no amendment changes necessary. We can
That's
go,
terrific.
there's no time lag here. And just as soon as the applications are submitted, the mayor presents his nominee to council, council confirms, and they can be here just in a short amount of time.
Well, if we got 2 applicants, then it would make it possible for Mr. Shaffey to be able to withdraw.
I told him it was his decision. He
Yeah.
could ask for a 3-month leave, or he could, if he felt like it was,
Yeah,
you know,
we certainly don't want him to.
Hard for some reason for him to do
Once
it.
somebody has been around long enough to get some experience, it's so much more useful than having having everybody be brand new. But if he feels he needs to, it would be really helpful to have 2 applicants rather than just 1, or even 3.
One other thing I'd like to mention is there was a 4th case scheduled for this evening.
Yeah.
It was for 315 East State Street. It was a request for a use variance. It had been first sent to the City Planning Commission because the Planning Commission has to make a recommendation to the zoning board before you can grant a use variance. I presented that to the Planning Commission. They requested a public hearing. I contacted all the neighbors within 500 feet. Actually, Paul did. I said that's what we're going to do, and when I turned that task over to Paul, it ended up being 116 different properties we had to look up using records from the auditors. So we widely advertised that for the Planning Commission at their request, and there was quite a bit of testimony in opposition. The Planning Commission's recommendation that you would have had tonight, if this case were on the agenda, was not to grant the use variance for that property. But Mr. Smeltzer, after that hearing, withdrew his request.
I see.
So what I wanted to do was just to let everybody know that that issue is gone from the agenda.
Okay.
There
That
was
the
a
house
request to
was to
withdraw.
be an office space.
Right, he wanted to use it for a commercial office, banking, investment type business, and he's not going to do that now. So I just wanted everybody to know that too, those people, because there was pretty substantial interest from people in the neighborhood,
Negative interest.
right?
Interesting.
And just why are we postponing the bar case? The patio, parking bar
Yeah,
case?
we had talked about having another meeting, because I do have a lot of refusals pending. Right now, though, as of today, I only have what I'd call 2 perfected cases where they've submitted all their documentation required, their notarized statement, their arguments, and their advertising fee or hearing fee. So I can't see really why we want to have a meeting for just two people. Now, I have recently had 2 notices of violation. These are not refusals from permit applications, but things that I've noted in the community or have been brought to my attention. I've written what's called a notice of violation to Business at 7 West Carpenter. They're going to, my understanding is they're going to appeal to you for a parking variance. And also, trying to remember the address, the bank on Stimson, because of their lighting. They've received the same notice, and I've given them I have several options available to me. When I talk to appellants, they can conform, or they can request a variance.
What's the violation at the bank?
Violation at the bank is the new section pertaining to lighting, glare, and pollution. There's 2 sections. One's glare and pollution, the other one's trespass. So there's a 0.1 foot candles permitted maximum at the property line. I used a light meter, didn't really find a discrepancy there. It has to do with glare and pollution. No lights to be emitted below the lowest member of the fixture. So this fixture, lights going everywhere. So I'd received a complaint, talked to the builder. There's been some things in the newspaper about it. And so one of the things somebody can do, other than comply with my notice, or comply with the code, is to appeal the decision. So these cases, you may hear a request for variance, or you may have a request to determine an administrative review of my determination. That's the very first thing when you go through the reading of the things the board's allowed to do. The first thing is a person can ask for administrative review. Essentially, they can say the zoning inspector was having a bad day that day. Can you straighten him out? In other words, you can reverse my decision. The second thing they can do is ask for a variance. So I'm not sure in each of these cases just exactly what it is they're going to do, but those letters have gone out. I do have a refusal on another property where I know that they're going to appeal because of stacked parking. R3 zone, stacked parking. They converted office space, a building containing office space completely, into now office space plus a rental. Exactly the same, well, not exactly the same situation, Mr. Hines. They're actually converting. So we have those 3 outstanding, and I know those people intend to appeal. Just so the public knows, there's no way I can stop the use at any of these places until people who have given a notice of violation have exhausted their due process, and that includes first coming to the board, asking for either administrative review or a variance, and then if denied, appeal to the Court of Common Pleas. So there's just this long, protracted process. I can't ask the court, I probably wouldn't be granted by the court a court order to stop a use. That's the only process I have to actually stop a use, is to have the court order it.
Well, then we're not going to start that process next week, though. We're
No,
not going to
so
do
those
it
things
until
won't be
July
here. So
11th.
I can't see, if we're going to come and it's going to be that, possibly that exhausting that night, Pat, let's just put it all in
Okay.
one night.
Well, in that case, I guess we will meet again on July 11, I guess it is?
July 11th.
July 11, and for this evening, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.